The 37 Requisites of Enlightenment is a very large collection of Dhamma formulas that serves as the comprehensive product to enlightenment. So it consists of the most important mental qualities and practices taught by the Buddha for realizing awakening. These menus, so to speak. You can think of it as a collection of 7 menus, but because it's a lot to remember, one memory device you can use is to look at it like a phone number and start by memorizing that. So as a phone number, it goes 875-5444. That's 875-5444. Now let's have a look at the formula makeup of this. There are 8 folds on the path. This refers to the Eightfold Path, of course. The 7 stands for the 7 factors of enlightenment. Then there are 5 faculties, 5 powers, 4 right efforts, 4 foundations of mindfulness, and 4 iddhipadas. Some of these structures are very well known, but a few of them are seldom talked about. Take the 5 faculties and the 5 powers, for instance. These factors connect to the Eightfold Path to form an interlocking locking structure. So it's a brilliant system. The Buddha was an excellent teacher who arranged these teachings beautifully for easy memorization. Now that culture relied entirely on memory since nothing was written down, so the teachings were meant to be absorbed very deeply in that way, and there wasn't many other ways to do it until they finally made writing a standard thing. Now when you read the suttas, you'll notice the items always follow a specific order rather than just being a random list. So this consistent structure directly supports memory and recall, and in some cases it is necessary to have a structure. It's actually a natural structure in nature to do things in a certain way, because doing certain kinds of rules and laws followed in a certain way are acting against entropy, which is the law of decay. So this design creates a wonderful challenge, as these teachings represent the complete encompassing set. There are other formulas that are missing from the list, but this has many of them. Now, the Buddha himself recited this sutta and called these 37 requisites the wings to awakening, the very essence of the Dhamma. His guidance helps you internalize and clearly understand this vast collection. So holding on to this overarching architecture gives you access to every important part, nearly every important part of the Dhamma. Now, you might notice something significant missing from the items just listed. The 4 Brahma Viharas, for example, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, these are not included as a specific category among the 37, but however, certain aspects still appear. So equanimity shows up in the 7 factors of enlightenment, and it's featured in the Eightfold Path as well as right concentration. So it's a different word for the same thing. So this is the very nature of the 4th jhana, equanimity, or a pure equanimity. So we can still internalize those factors in our practice. So there are all kinds of ingenious ways to organize these factors in the menus as well. One very interesting approach involves looking at a set like the 5 frequent factors. Now, these 37 factors aren't all distinct or different, as there is a lot of overlap among them. The 5 faculties menu offers a great way to look at these 5 common elements. And to list them, we have faith, or saddha, energy, viriya, mindfulness, sati, and concentration, samadhi, and the fourth, and then the fifth one is wisdom, or panya. So that makes a nice little group of to memorize. It's a bit like how the Ten Commandments are split into five parts on 2 tablets. So we have faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And as it happens, these are the most frequently mentioned of the 37 factors. The first one, saddha, is mentioned twice and appears in 2 categories. The next one, energy, is mentioned 9 times. 9 out of the 37 factors have to do with effort or energy. And these are basic aspects of one another. Then there's mindfulness, the famous mindfulness that gets the star billing all the time. And actually, it only gets 8 mentions, but it's still quite a lot. It recurs 8 times. Meanwhile, samadhi, concentration, appears 4 times, and wisdom appears 5 times. So this is another way to grab the material in a small group. If you know the 5 faculties, then you also know these recurring loops. So to repeat them, faith is twice, energy 9 times, mindfulness 8 times, concentration 4 times, and wisdom 5 times. And for this talk, because energy and effort recur 9 times, we're going to feature that topic. Now I'm using this as our initial focus because quite often people want to skip straight ahead into serenity practice, maybe looking for concentration, the jhanas or samadhi, and concentration only occurs 4 times. But that is a very advanced practice, and it can't be approached. You shouldn't really approach it until you have sufficient energy and good energy control. Because usually the failure to achieve stillness of the mind or good concentration, jhana or samadhi, that happens simply because failing to achieve that is because you don't have enough energy to fulfill it. It's not just about being zestful or having coffee necessarily. It's energy control and transmutation and brahmacharya. So this is where we can really play with these factors. Looking again at these 5 faculties, faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Energy element carries a specific risk. When it becomes excessive, you become agitated. Concentration has a risk too. It can become slothful and dull. So this is exactly why these 2 need each other. Energy and concentration must balance one another. Energy feeds concentration so that it doesn't lapse into dullness. You'll see a lot of people meditating and nodding off like this, nodding their head or lifting their chin, right? They're resting their head on their neck basically. And they might be thinking that they must have had a really deep meditation. It was so deep they were almost sleeping. And so it's easy to mistake a dullness for progress. The realization is that true state of concentration or absorption is actually a very invigorating, energized state of mind, and it's a very beautiful experience. So you might be in this position because your body is so well rested. You might be basically dangling your head somewhere or leaning with your eyes closed and you're almost sleeping. But the thing that distinguishes it from just nodding off or being hypnotized into sleep is your awareness. So if you're not really, time goes by, you don't know what happened, you spaced out, you lost a sense of time or place, you got disoriented, and you forgot that you were doing the practice, then it was over. That was completely just hypnosis. It's not awareness. It's the opposite of that. You just fell asleep or became deeply drowsy, right? So concentration and awareness of self and everything is key. That has to be maintained. Now, of course, one of the characteristic emotions that accompanies this when it's attained, practiced thoroughly, is joy. So at the beginning of our practice, you shouldn't try to rush too fast to a sharp, single-pointed focus. Think of the focus you get with binoculars rather than a laser. The type of concentration we're talking about in meditation is not laser-like, but it's more like a telescope, binocular-like. When you get the adjustment just right, everything becomes clear. It becomes very clear, but it doesn't burn through metal unless you've developed psychic powers, or maybe you're an arahant or something. You've had lots of practice. Quite often, if you have a laser model in your mind, when people say concentration, if that's your concept, you could end up wrinkling your forehead and clenching your eyebrows, focusing with extreme tension. But this just tends to give you, this just tenses your muscles, gives you tension. It doesn't relax anything. It's straining on your conscience. It's straining on your face muscles. It's like needing a good pair of glasses when your old prescription starts going out. You might get headaches, or you have to squint to see things. So that kind of effortless creativity, clarity, is what we're aiming for when it's done properly. We have to hold the right similes and the right examples in our minds to know what the Buddha is talking about. We can't just rely on what we thought concentration meant when we were 12 years old at school, or wherever we picked up the idea that it requires a clenched prefrontal cortex and tight tension. So that's why I usually start this talk with an advocacy for energy, just working on staying light, cultivating joy and friendliness, and there's a requisite for reducing sexual activity and becoming chaste or celibate, practicing brahmacharya, because that also, it's the fundamental source of your energy is your sexual energy. And developing friendliness so that you have a less stressed, more joyful state of mind. Many people watching this are conscientious and might even feel nervous about sleeping in when you go on something like a retreat. At some places you encounter a stern advocacy to get up early in the morning, like the monks, and it can leave you worried about what terrible thing they'll do with your privileges if you don't do this, you don't follow the strict rules of the monastery. But instead, you want to abandon those kinds of anxiety-driven concerns entirely. If, at least when you're on things like retreats, it's you're not a monk. You're just learning. It's not conducive to be stressed out about this. And when you go on to a retreat, you're there because you actually want to meditate and improve the quality of your life and reduce stress, reduce unnecessary stress or distress and suffering. So that's exactly the point of the exercise. The essence of the Dhamma is to turn away from the unskillful structures most people blunder along with, and instead refine the mental processes and attitudes that alleviate suffering. So you'll feel that relief throughout your entire mind, your emotional structure, and your body as well. This is how you initiate the practice. The first part, you shouldn't try to get too still. Instead, just focus on staying awake and staying energized. The emotional center closest to the state is joy. While other emotions certainly come with a deeper concentration, the first approach relies on joy and energy working together. And in fact, these are the factors of the first jhana. And you can experience these factors long before you achieve full jhana concentration. And, we've all been joyful before. If it's hard to imagine what the concept of jhana and what it would feel like, we've all been energized by something. We've all experienced excitement. We've all experienced a nice pleasantness. So we do know what it feels like to be very awake and alert, zealous. Meditation is simply gaining more command over those things and really developing it to a high, skillful degree. Learning how to produce these very skillful emotions, bringing them into existence, sustaining them within ourselves, and developing them instead of waiting for the world to arrange itself, things and situations to happen, circumstances to unfold so that we can start producing joy and feeling it. That's never how it goes, right? In Buddhism, it's always reliant on your own effort and internal states. And we can't afford to wait for the world to present some sort of joyful opportunity anyway. We have to learn how to generate it on ourselves. We've always been the one, we have to keep in mind, we're always the one to produce that joy anyway. It was never the world doing any of these things for us. These reactions we get, we've always projected that back onto the world in our reactions. Most people just need certain cues or external events and they attribute their joy to the event itself, but it's never the event. It's always something we do mentally. So it just doesn't occur to most people, of course, to investigate how they did it. How did they feel this way? Or just see if they can replicate it without the external stimuli or event. Now, we can do this in an empty room even, and this is exactly why we have empty rooms in the monasteries. It's to take away the sensory experience, the external complexity, the stimulation, and you want a low sensory environment so that you can generate these qualities on your own. This is precisely the advocacy of the Buddha, to generate these things, to create them. We can do this, but it requires a new way of thinking about things. But most of us, as Buddhist students, followers, and so on, we're aware of that. It's a self-generating practice, self-reliance. So we begin with energy, which is featured 9 times. And there's a specific teaching on this, which appears as right effort, or samma vayama, as the 6th factor of the Eightfold Path. And overlapping that and almost identical to it is the category of the 4 right efforts. So they happen to be completely identical. If you look at the Eightfold Path, you'll see the basic title of right effort, followed by right mindfulness. But if you look deeper, as if you're opening a drop-down menu, you'll see the 4 right efforts contained within it. So the Buddha actually takes those 4 right efforts, he takes them out and places them into separate suttas. He does the exact same thing with mindfulness, with the 4 foundations of mindfulness formula, for example, which are already embedded in the Eightfold Path again. So in some of the suttas that outline the Eightfold Path, they show the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but he also dedicated entire suttas just to expanding on them and providing details. Now, if you're well versed and familiar with the suttas, you might find that right effort is not often taught. There's a lot of emphasis on virtue and morality. Suttas on mindfulness and loving kindness, things like the Brahma Viharas, but even discussions on samadhi, but very few specific teachings on right effort. So it seems to be skipped over, even though it's a very important, necessary part of the practice. So it has 9 mentions out of the 37, which is the most of any single element. So you might say that that Buddhism is a philosophical religion of effort. In spite of this kind of lack of explanation, it's extremely important that we see effort as the central feature of the practice because it gives us independence and it's a fuel for our practice. These teachings emerged out of civilizations surrounded by frameworks that made no mention of personal effort. Life was generally thought to work through deities and spells and rituals. And Christianity took that route as well by placing all of our responsibilities, basically, and all of our effort on Jesus. And leaving the only quality left is basically faith, not much else. Faith and works. But everything that seems to happen seems to be, his doing. It's Jesus's effort or result. He did it. He helped to, etc. And Christianity, in fact, wasn't originally like this. The original, sect Christianity in the smaller groups before the Roman Empire, before you could say the enfranchisement of it, it was very different entity on its own. But without digressing too much on the Western religions, the Buddha made a startling separation from that view of relying on deities or prayer or relying on just the Buddha to help us out. He told us to never mind all of that. In fact, shedding that view is one of the distinct factors of the first stage of enlightenment, setting aside of the Silabhata Paramasa, the belief of rites and rituals alone, will liberate you. It's kind of like the belief in faith alone. It's similar, right? It's just putting all of the expectation on this outside thing. The entire culture right across Asia was steeped and engulfed in rites and rituals and magical powers as the means to secure benefits in this life and whatever came after. But the Buddha clarified that this entire superstition and belief structure is exactly what drops away at the first stage of enlightenment. It simply doesn't work that way. It works by understanding how our mind functions and how our emotional structure functions. The primary means to develop this is right effort, and not just any effort. It has to be right effort. This is why it's such a heavily featured element. We have to know that there is a real effort involved in this, and that it is entirely about changing our minds. These are the 4 aspects of changing our mind. There's knowing what needs to go, knowing what needs to stay, what needs to be brought into existence if it isn't there, and what needs to be maintained or cultivated and sustained. So these are the 4 right efforts. The first right effort is to prevent. In brief, the 5 hindrances, they breed hostility and agitation, sloth and doubt. If we remember the summary of the Buddha's entire teaching, greed, hatred, and delusion are the problem, while generosity, kindness, and clarity or wisdom are the solution. So the exact opposite. When we're remembering the 5 hindrances, the first 2 are the really important heavy ones. Notice that they appear in the same order: greed and hostility. So this serves as a great memory device, as these things tend to fall into specific orders. These 5 hindrances need to be prevented, and stopping trouble before it starts is the advice. The Buddha is trying to give us a good practical advice. It's like a parent saying, okay, here is how to deal with things. Stop it before it starts. Because once it gets started, it's very hard to get out of it. Once the anger gets going, once we start investing in that critical mind and in resentment and revenge, and reactions and responses, it is tremendously hard to stop. It just spirals down and it distorts our thinking in the end. So we're really much better off getting up first thing in the morning and saying, this is what's going to happen. I've been doing this for months now, or I've been living this way for a while. I should know this. They're difficult people to deal with. You know, it's Monday or it's Tuesday or something. So-and-so is working. I have to work with them. There are all kinds of things in the world today. I'm going to get notifications and emails. I have to do this and that for my kids or my partner. It won't help me to fall into anger. It's not going to be worth it. It's going to distort my judgment, my reasoning, and it's going to exhaust me. And so it's going to ruin my happiness. I need to approach things in a different way. I have to just be aware of it. I gotta know that this can happen, get triggered, so that I can prevent it better. So we need to remember that first thing in the morning, because if we can just start the day with that determination, quite often the anger won't even come up. I mean, of course it can. And if it does, we'll much faster catch it. We'll be ready for it. We'll see it. But if we don't, we just blunder out in the world, dash out the door, we get our coffee and our toast, and then we just fall into the same unrelenting reactions, repetitive reactions, unconscious ones. So it requires prevention ahead of time. This is thoughtful prevention. It doesn't actually take much time. You just have to be aware and make a note of it. There's a lot of advice out there on how to meditate in the morning and prepare for your day, but not everyone has time for that. It's not completely necessary. So, you may not do anything at all for it. It doesn't hurt to even just do. It helps to even do just 5 minutes. It makes a difference to just set your awareness and prepare for the day with a 5-minute meditation. So this is more of a preparatory meditation, a reflection. It doesn't have to be a formal meditation. We just have to remind ourselves, what was the advice again? What am I going to do differently? What are the precepts and so on? I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to get mad at this. I'm not going to worry about that, etc. So recalling that only takes a minute or so. And by doing this, we're establishing ourselves, remembering what we shouldn't do, remembering what we should do. So these are the 4 right efforts, which align with right effort in the Eightfold Path as well. Now, the next aspect is, what if the unskillful things do come up? What do we do then? Well, we remove them in a very systematic way, and we have specific techniques for removing them. The easiest scenario is that they don't come up at all because we decided we're not going to feed those negative emotions anymore. I'm not going to let it happen. We can apply that to the greed element too, to desire. We might catch ourselves thinking, what if I could just, win the lottery? What would I do then? What am I going to do with all that money? If that's a bad habit of too much fantasizing about things, then you're going to stop that. It's not as destructive as anger, but wanting also creates an immediate sense of loss. To want is to lack. The moment we want something, we lack it. We just went into mental debt and created a feeling of lack within ourselves. And of course, the second before you thought of that item, you weren't really lacking anything at all. It was only the moment you thought of it that you suddenly feel this lack. So when we forget to want things, we also don't lack things. It's entirely in the mind. It is all about the mind. These are the techniques and strategies for this prevention and removal. And we have to gain fluency with what the 5 hindrances actually are. So I already mentioned greed and hatred. Hatred or anger is a strong word, but it covers everything from, it's a spectrum. It counts from mild irritability and aversion, I think it's ill will, or is it hatred? Yeah, in the 3 poisons, hatred is actually an umbrella term. It's anger, the spectrum of anger, but it's also aversion, actually. It's not liking something to the point of being afraid, of fear. But they don't use different words. Traditionally, we don't use different words, so it's hatred, but the better word in the West is aversion. Something you don't like. You're either angry or you're scared of it. So hatred could be mild irritability, and aversion, you may not, or maybe you just don't like something. And then it goes all the way to the extreme. There's white rage, there's anger, there's hatred in the typical sense. And then there's things like aversion or fear, all in this one term. So the needle on these emotions swings across a very big, wide spectrum, but we have to pay attention to all of it. The next 2 hindrances are agitation and sloth. If we remember the 5 faculties, the second one is energy, which is the exact opposite of sloth. So the problem with concentration is that it can lapse into sloth, while the problem with energy is that it can spin into agitation. When they go off track, this is the bipolar manic depressive dynamic. Now, in its clinical exaggerated form, it's a extreme condition, but everyone experiences it to some degree. Sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. We're inflated, and then we're depressed and heavy and light, all in swinging in these swings. So we can see in human personality structures how easily the mind can drift very immensely off track in any direction. Now, the 2 dominant and most problematic hindrances are the first 2, greed and hatred, or in other words, desire and aversion. The second pair is a bit more embedded in basic human nature, but we can stabilize and actually work with these states. When we start to notice that our energies are low, we have to infuse ourselves with energy. And this is done by first recognizing the stagnation or low energy, and then applying specific strategies to pull it up. There are certain themes we can contemplate that naturally produce energy, which you see utilized across different traditions. One of them is reflecting on the question, how long is my life? When will it end? The Buddha encourages us not just to assume, things like I might be, I might live till 85 or 90 or so in good health and then die peacefully in my sleep. No, that is not a good way to practice. The Buddha wants you to be completely prepared for the worst case. Our lives could end anytime. We never know. So this isn't just another dull day. This could be our last day or even our last hour. How do we want to spend it? This is how we should see it. No hesitation. If there's something that we should do, we have to do it as soon as we can. So this is the kind of recollection we can use to pull ourselves out of dullness and stagnation. We see this truth play out in real life. We can be completely tired and sleepy, and then we watch the news and we're shocked by what has just started, some war somewhere, or somebody got attacked spontaneously, and it just reminds you just how unpredictable the world really is. So, and a shot of adrenaline only takes a startle, right? Some sudden event. So this happens because our life is suddenly on the line. We have an immediate recollection that life is too precarious and that there's no guarantees. So it instantly brings vitality and importance to the present moment. We have to have that awareness all the time. We can't forget that being alive as a human being is a precarious business. It's a precious thing. And there are other ways to arouse energy too, such as the thought of friends, nice things, pleasant things, loving kindness, or things that arouse loving kindness, beautiful moments in our life, our pets, so aside from the adrenaline of escaping danger, what are the best moments of our lives? They are often deep human relationships, connections with pets, as I said, creative pursuits, art projects, beautiful music, certain concerts, profound experiences in nature. These are the themes to bring the mind to restore ourselves and lift the mental fog. Some people reach a point of stagnation where they feel that they have to sell their house and hit the road just to feel alive again, but we can learn to generate that vitality directly. It shouldn't always come from outside things, of course. And also another good thing is there's different practices to arouse energy. One of the best things is to be in a brightly lit place, because your eyes respond, your brain responds to the light better, right? If you're studying in a dark part of your room or in a basement, you should step outside and get some natural sunlight. Screens do wake us up a lot, especially if they're on the blue hue slightly. And then sunlight really wakes you up. And this is all stuff we do before we go for the coffee, which is something you really should be careful of, because the regulation for coffee used to be something like 4 cups, then it went down to 3. Doctors would say 3 cups is acceptable, but nowadays it's 2 cups, and it's really strong stuff. It causes way more problems than we think. It does cause diabetes pretty easily. Just look into that. You don't want to abuse coffee. So yes, as I said, the best memories we have, encounters with people and animals and nature and art and music and religion and meditation. So these are ways to deal with low states. And they're just good practices too, just keep their spirits up. Now, this is where right effort comes in. You aren't always just battling negative things through prevention and removal. So the second half of aspect of right effort is the positive side, where you're cultivating positive emotions. You're doing this in steps where you eliminate negativity and cultivating positivity. So when positive things are present, when you're feeling energized and joyful, We don't just look at it and indifferently and say, well, there's joy, it's arising. I'm going to be detached from it. It's going to pass. It's impermanent. It's anicca. I'm not going to get attached to it. It's joy. We'll just let it pass. So the Buddha does say that all things will pass, but your obligation here is to sustain and maintain joy, positive states. It's good to do that. You just don't want to be too attached, but you don't want to be detached either and just expecting that it'll pass soon and that's the good thing. If a positive state is not there, your job is to bring it into existence, conjure it, gather it. Use your mind and use some other things, as I said, like music, and it's okay to use some external stuff as supplementary. But, use your own mind, right? Think about the things that make you really joyful. Bringing up these positive states, then see how long you can keep them going. We aren't meant to just walk around indifferently, watching our emotions rise and pass away. That's the wrong advice. It's not very human. It's very difficult to do that. The Buddha never advised that, actually. He advised that we learn to develop and maintain positive emotional states and mental activities. It's more natural to have some emotions flowing through you. And if they're not negative, they can be positive as so long as they're not attached states. So, and then we learn how to conduct ourselves in society in a more virtuous and upright way too. It isn't all just indifferent observation. There are positive qualities that need to be actively cultivated and maintained and deepened. So this is the next stage after bringing them into existence. If they aren't there, you generate them and you deliberately seek out the unarisen, wholesome qualities to bring them into your life. And later on, as our practice deepens and we find a very profound stillness, we will bring that into existence, the samadhi. If it isn't there yet, we will cultivate it. But first, we have to develop energy. Otherwise, any attempts to experience a deeper, supernormal serenity will fail because we didn't complete the preliminaries of raising energy and joy. So as we progress, we can aspire to bring something into existence that we might not have ever experienced before in our life. A truly deep, still meditation, that absorption of concentration. And you may wonder, can I bring it with me? Can I bring that in? Because it's a very powerful, positive state. And can I take it along with me on the path? Yes, you can. In fact, joy and samadhi, the jhanas, is one of the 7 factors of awakening. It's right concentration. So you can see how these two sides oppose each other. First 2 right efforts are to prevent and remove the 5 hindrances, while the second 2 right efforts are to cultivate and bring into existence the, Brahma Viharas, basically, the states of joy, the supernormal emotions, which are part of the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is how we unite all these factors together. We have the Eightfold Path, the 4 right efforts, 7 factors of enlightenment. And remember, the number is 875-5444.